Here in Louisiana, we are laser focused on building prosperity for our state and its amazing people through the power of education. We are proud to partner with KL to make sure we are helping our state's adult learners reach their college and career goals. Louisiana Board of Regents is especially excited to share 50th birthday with KL. Happy birthday, KL.
Good morning. That's cheerful. I'm Annette Parker, president of South Central College and chair of the KL's Advisory Council, and I want to thank you for joining us this morning. Well, I don't think Janet's message about impact in the state of Louisiana could be any more fitting, given that this morning's panel discussion, during which we will have the privilege of learning about practice-proven strategies that are helping adult learners and workers succeed in Southern Louisiana. And so now I'd like to introduce our panel. First is Josh Tatum, Vice President of Business Growth and Retention, GNO Incorporated. Tristan Denley, Deputy Commissioner for Academic Affairs and Innovation with the Louisiana Board of Regents. Missy Hobson, Senior Vice President, Chief Learning and Workforce Development Officer at Ochsner Health System. Osmar Padilla, Assistant Secretary for Workforce Development with the Louisiana Workforce Commission. And Sumesh Arora, Program Manager, Diversity and Workforce Strategies and Energy. Yes, Entergy. So please give a warm welcome to our panel today.
Well, thank you so much, Anita, and it's great to see everybody. Good morning. I hope everybody had a wonderful Halloween and had the evening to get some treats and not tricks last night. And I hope you enjoyed the time here in New Orleans. Again, my name is Josh Tatum. I'm Vice President of Business Growth and Retention at Greater New Orleans, Inc. We're the regional economic development organization here in Southeast Louisiana. I'm so excited this morning to share and be here with this wonderful panel, esteemed colleagues and panel and group here based in Louisiana and Mississippi and doing some really innovative work. And I just want to again, thank you all for your time and as innovators in this space for adult leaders to make a change and to grow the economy. And I think today what you'll hear as well is some of the work that's really, as I say, the nitty-gritty and what we do behind the scenes, that really our goal is to hope that it drives individuals and the economy to work for the people. So, you know, without further ado, I think we just dive on in this morning because we got a lot of good stuff to cover, and I hope at the end we'll do some Q&A as well. So save your questions, write it down, and we look forward to engage at the end. So before further ado, let's just dive in and do some quick introductions. So Sumesh, you want to start us off?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. All right, thank you. So my name is Sumesh Arora. I work with Entergy, which is a utility company that serves 4 states, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we do as we go through the panel. But I've been with the company a little over 2 years, but I have had about 25 years in the energy space and about 13, 15 years before that in the chemical process industry. And my role here is to really help develop the next generation talent for the utility business, and hopefully they then get attracted to the Entergy as an employer of choice as well. But a lot of it is really working with the young talent and helping them make aware of the opportunities that exist in the energy space, and also making sure that we're diversifying our workforce so that our workforce looks more like the communities that we serve in those 4 states. So I'll stop here. All right.
Yeah, so I'm Tristan Denley. I'm Deputy Commissioner for Academic Affairs and Innovation at the Louisiana Board of Regents. So I'm effectively the Chief Academic and Innovation Officer for the state of Louisiana. So I work with all of the universities and colleges in the state. So primarily that work is with the 28 public universities and colleges, but not exclusive with those. We work with all the proprietary institutions, with the private institutions that are part of the Louisiana Independent Colleges and Universities. So all of those institutions, probably more than 250 probably when we add them all together, are part of the work that we do. And what I really try to do, I'm effectively the quarterback for the state's attainment goals. So back in 2019, the Louisiana Board of Regents put together a master plan for the coming decade, that by 2030, they would increase the educational attainment across the state of Louisiana from where it was at that point, which was somewhere around 45, 46% of people who had credentials of value past high school, to the goal, which is that 60% of our working age population here in the state of Louisiana would have a credential of value. And so you can imagine, and we'll talk more about it, there's all kinds of strategies that need to be in place to be able to move the needle on that. And just to kind of put that idea in perspective, we are now at 51%. So we have moved the state attainment of education in the state of Louisiana to a record level of 51% here in the state. I know some of you probably have been in the state of Louisiana over that time and know that it's not been an easy time. It's not been a smooth sailing kind of time. That disruption has been the pattern, not the exception. Tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires, pandemics, everything you can possibly imagine, and yet the state has really persisted on this goal. And it's not just, and we'll hear it more today, it's not just the Board of Regents' goal, it is a state goal that we are all united in reaching. And I think we all recognize why it is that that's so important. The reality is that there are many people in this state who are victims of multi-generational poverty, and the key to undoing that, the key to changing that, is education, the kinds of topics that this conference has been all about. And so that's exactly what we're looking to do. And each percentage point, that's 23,000 people. It's not like a couple of people. Every point the progress that's been made, the image I always have in my head is the progress that's been made since 2019 is a full stadium at the Superdome. So think to yourself that picture of a full stadium at the Superdome, all cheering because they now have a credential of value that will undo multi-generational poverty for them and their families. That's a pretty cool picture. So yeah, more to talk about, but that's the goal.
I think it's beautiful. You just reminded me we had Taylor Swift here, so we had 3
Indeed.
nights. Each night would have been a half a percentage point.
Exactly right.
So for the Swifties in the house, that's a way to think about it.
Exactly right. Can we talk Taylor into having like a industry recognized
I think
certification?
I like that idea. I really like that idea.
It would be great. Missy Hobson, I'm with Auctioneer Health, and I come to Auctioneer Health for the last 14 years by recognizing the value of having a versatile skill set. Started off in higher education, was teaching at Xavier University up until Hurricane Katrina said, go find a different line of work. And I was able to pivot into a different opportunity in industry. And I carry that lesson with me as I think about how do we build a healthcare workforce. Many of you in this room are part of helping to build that workforce, and you know very well at the time of COVID's onset in 2020, you heard lots of conversation around a looming workforce shortage for nursing, for physicians. And some people thought that that was simply an acute attack. It's not, it's a chronic condition. We got to build a workforce. So I certainly want to talk about how we see the employer's role in building pathways to prosperity, and how skills and building your skills credentials, industry's credentials of value, can be part of that equation.
I'm not sure how I follow that up with all of my esteemed panelists there, but good morning, y'all. Osmar Padilla. I serve as Assistant Secretary for Workforce Development at the Louisiana Workforce Commission. So admittedly, I've been in my role for about 8-9 months, so still new-ish. But I come to the Workforce Commission by way of actually Greater New Orleans, Inc., where I worked with Josh in workforce development projects, and prior to that, in higher ed. So I essentially oversee the state's Office of Workforce Development in the Workforce Commission. And our mission is to equip and empower every Louisianan with the skills needed to thrive in today's economy and tomorrow's economy. And in addition to that, it's also working with our employer partners, right, to address their needs and making sure that there's that true alignment. And we accomplish that in a couple of different ways, or a myriad of different ways. One is through programs, right? So we oversee the public workforce system. So a lot of folks know that through WIOA, American Job Centers, et cetera. But we also have a registered apprenticeship, incumbent worker training program opportunities as well, vocational rehabilitation, and numerous other programs that we deliver across the state with our partners. Another kind of element of our work is data. So our labor forecast, our occupational forecast, our labor market information, the data that's provided to the Bureau of Labor Statistics also lives within the Office of Workforce Development, obviously helping us inform data-driven decision-making for a lot of those programs. And lastly, and I think kind of important to this conversation, something that's a little new to the Workforce Commission and to the Office of Workforce Development is really kind of also taking a 30,000-foot view of workforce across the state, right? I think it's probably no surprise to everyone in this room. Louisiana, much like many other states, workforce development can be very siloed in Louisiana. And so both the governor and the legislature have given us now a mandate to essentially kind of play a little bit of quarterbacking and coordination to help align a lot of the elements of the workforce system across the state. So that's a little bit newer to our role and something that's kind of currently evolving, but very much exciting times. And so excited to dig into the conversation we've got ahead of us.
Oh, wonderful. Well, let's dive in. And I think what I really want to start off here is, really looking at what the title, and I love the title, when we talked about how do we unlock that education, which unlocking to me means access, means opportunity, means, breaking the multi-generational poverty that we're talking about. But also it looks at, if we break that, that also ties into our economic growth as a region, as a state, and as an economy nationally. And that's so true when we look at really breaking barriers of access and programs that can do that. And so I do want to start off, many of us have worked together, as I say, the nitty gritty of whiteboarding and seeing where the holes are in programs, where the holes are in the economy, where the holes are in community access. So I want to just start, with this question, as much as, we've worked together over the years of looking at the economy and the labor market, what's missing when a supply demand in, our higher education system. What have you seen over the years that have been really strategic, goal or success that you've seen for a strategy when we're trying to implement, say, a new program or a new policy that many people can take with them? What's that maybe one strong strategy that you've seen the most for strong outcomes?
Sure, I'll start since we were going down this way. Maybe I can give a little bit of the perspective on the utility business before I even dive into that, because I think that's part of our challenge too when we are trying to attract people to this industry. A lot of them just really don't know about the types of careers that exist. And I mean, I've done presentations before, and literally there are 100 different types of jobs that it takes to actually run a utility company. It's somewhat similar to some of the other areas also. We have healthcare on the field also, and there are a lot of different jobs out there. I did not ever think that my title will be actually Diversity and Workforce Strategies Program Manager, right? I didn't think my first title when I first got in the chemical industry was going to be chemical microscopist. So it's a long ways from that, right? So there's so many different opportunities, career opportunities out there, and part of our role really goal is to really first help early talent, but also adults, learners, to really help them understand the types of opportunities that exist. In order to be able to do those, help them understand those opportunities, and also help explain the fact that the energy industry as a whole is transitioning very rapidly. Most of it's ever done in really the history since, we've been using fossil fuels now 100 plus years, and we've been kind of stuck in those same business models, if you will, for a very long time. But within the last 10 years, I would say, maybe 20 years at the most, but really within the last 10 years, and now as we look at decarbonization goals by 2030 and 2050, there's just so much change that's happening in this industry before, like it's never happened before. And it's a really exciting time to be in this space. when we talk about getting to 2050 of net zero, there are technologies that have not been invented yet to be able to get us there and those goals. And not only do we talk about 2050, that's kind of a marker in place, but some of the technology that we're putting in the ground today, for example, Southern Company just built a nuclear power plant that came online this year. It is highly conceivable that that plant is going to be running till 2100. Who in this room is thinking about 2100, right? Hardly anybody's thinking about 2100, right, as to when it comes around.
9 o'clock tonight, right?
That's right, that's right. So when we're talking about talent development and having the progression of people coming into this industry, you could literally spend your entire career in this space, right, and be at one company doing that. Because these plants, how many of you have been to Hoover Dam? Show of hands. How many of you remember visiting the Visitor Center when it was actually commissioned? Anybody remembers that? And I teach at a university also, so I'm sorry if I bring that up. Right, 1935, right, is when Hoover Dam came online. So next decade, it would have been around for 100 years, right? So these assets that the energy industry puts in the ground are such long-term assets, and for one utility to do it all by itself is almost impossible, right? So we actually are really, kind of going back to your question actually, it's about partnerships, right? How do we team up with the organizations, whether it's nonprofits like GNO Inc., and I'll give an example later on about an organization, nonprofit we work with here right in New Orleans also. So we really need to get that message out to individuals through our partners that, hey, this industry is a very unique industry, and now it's at a transition point like it's never been before. And check out all the different types of career opportunities that exist for early stage, but also for very experienced learners, right, who've been in this industry and who are trying to take their skills in a very different direction now. We're talking about, Louisiana is actually kind of unique in the sense that we're talking about carbon capture from the emissions of different power plants and putting that in the ground. And Louisiana has kind of taken a lead that we will be what's called primacy of the wells, not to get too technical here, but we don't really know how all that's going to work right now, right? So Entergy got a grant from the Department of Energy to just do a study, and the study is going to take about $15–20 million and about 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 years, right, just to do the study. And then hopefully we'll be able to put that stuff into the ground and make sure no harm is done. But people goes back to the people and the talent who's going to be able to do those types of work, and the training that the universities will have to work with them to be able to do that. So it really is all about partnership, because there are just so many different things that are happening all at the same time. And we want to make sure that my team is really looking at how do we put those strategic partnerships and programs in place to be able to make sure the talent is there when we need it.
Thank you so
That was a long answer.
No,
sorry.
that's
Super.
yeah.
So let me build off that a little bit, because when I mentioned that 60% goal, there's a lot of states that have goals like that, and often those goals are somehow sort of, I don't know, aspirational or just sort of a number that's sitting out there. I want to sort of paint that in a little bit of a different picture, and so show how it's at least informing the work that we're doing. And I really want to say a big thanks to Osmar. He mentioned this historical silos, and you're exactly right. And I think, over the last few months, we really have been able to break down so many of those silos, and, it's a work in progress, just like everything else, and same with Josh too. So first of all, the picture of that 60%. 2030 is a ways away. It's not anywhere near as far away as it was, and now but it's still a ways away. The future is, though, already with us. So if you do I did a data analysis just quite recently so first of all, the job ads here in Louisiana, the 250,000 or so jobs that were advertised in 2023-24, and what kinds of credentials employers were looking for as part of those job ads. Those who specified educational levels, and you can imagine the vast majority of them did. I could look to see, well, okay, so what are those credentials that they wanted, and at what kind of level were they? What you find out is that 68% of those jobs already today need something past a high school diploma. You can imagine those are all kinds of different credentials. So about 10% of them want some kind of industry recognized certification or short-term workforce training. About another 8 or 10% want associate degrees. About another 20% want bachelor's. All the way across masters, doctoral degrees. We can see that full spread. This sort of gets to Josh's gap, because then what we can also do is to look to see, well, what does the attainment distribution look like in Louisiana today? In what ways do the education of our citizens match up then with the demands that we're finding in the workforce? And what we see is, well, I already told you, we have 51% of people who have credentials past high school. That's short of the 68% that the jobs are asking for. But in fact, we fall short in every measure, right? We don't have enough people who have short-term workforce training. We don't have enough people with associate's degrees or bachelor's degrees or master's degrees or doctoral degrees. We need more of all of it. And so in that sense, all the work that we're trying to do to really try to expand access and college going writ large, right? Not everybody going to a four-year institution, but people going to some kind of educational training past high school that we can then recognize and have as part of the picture of the state is just, you can see right there in that picture how incredibly important that is. What's also then really important is that not only that those credentials are at the right level, but that they're in the right things, right? We also want people to graduate with the degrees that are in the right, that are leading to the right kind of occupations, and doing that again in a way that is, that you're using all of the data that's at hand. I mean, you've heard all of us kind of introduce ourselves and tell a little bit of our story. So I'm, as you can hear, a native New Orleanian.
The Bywater neighborhood, right?
I'm actually from, I have a dry sense of humor apparently this morning. So, so I'm from Cornwall in England. I'm not from here at all. And, you know, I mean, like, we've all had these lives that have taken us all over the place. And I don't think anybody here is probably working in their field in quite the way that they might have imagined, right? I'm a mathematician by trade. Do you think I work in my field? I tell you what I do. I bring my field to my work. And I do that every day. And everybody on this stage does that every day. And I bet most of you do it too. And so helping people to understand, helping employers understand, helping potential employees to understand, you know what it is that you're doing, what it is that you're studying, it may lead you in all kinds of directions, but whatever it is you learn, you can bring that to your job in all kinds of different and innovative ways, and that's incredibly valuable. That's a really important picture, and I think it's one that's sort of been absent from this kind of career journey idea for too long. And so this is something we're really trying to take seriously. How do we help create educational experiences at all kinds of different levels that enable people, yes, to be able to be work ready on day one and go work in their field, but also to be ready on day two to bring their field to their work, no matter where it is that it takes them.
Nice. I'm going to take a different take on it. When I think about adult learners coming in and becoming work ready, part of what I want to share is that partnership definitely is the foundation. It's key to all things. We also need to invest in some wraparound services for adult learners. When I think about what are the barriers that knock people out, we see it every day. It's hard to go and pursue that next credential of value if you're working a full-time, and in fact, oftentimes working two full-time jobs, trying to make ends meet. It's very difficult. And if you've been out of the academic system for a period of time, your confidence isn't there. And we need just some success coaches. We need some workforce navigators who can help us to navigate, much like we would do with patient care navigation. I can put a patient care navigator with a patient that can help them on the other side of a heart attack, of a stroke, so that they know how to continue to get the support that they need to be whole, to be sound of mind and body. We can provide that in the healthcare system. We need to do the same in the workforce ecosystem, is that we can take those adult learners who are coming back in, what are the prerequisites we need to make them ready for so that they can enter that next pathway, what are stipends, apprenticeships, what are the paid learning opportunities we can do so that adult who is trying to manage their car note, their house note, their apartment rent, which can be obscenely high, how are we helping them to be able to take that next step, either in a career journey up or lateral, so they're building new skills that will take them into new pipeline, new pathways for the future. If we don't get that equation right on the front end, get the right support there, so you asked Josh, what is that piece where all these parts play? The workforce system, we need to make sure that the right social services are there, the employer that we're not training you for jobs that were for yesterday. We're training you for the skills that we need now and the next skills that we're going to need tomorrow, because we know that they're coming and they're coming fast. And then we're partnering with intermediaries, our economic development arm, so that it's not just one employer who is saying, this is what we need. It's a collective. Let's talk about it collectively so that we're all building a sound talent pool and that we're giving many more people opportunity.
Once again, tough to follow everybody here. So I think in reflecting upon what everybody just said, I think for me what it really distills down is, and I kind of alluded to at the beginning, it's alignment, right? It's really alignment of kind of the workforce development ecosystem writ large, which I think is kind of critical to success just broadly in any endeavor, whether it's a particular program to all the way up to state level policy, right? Because when you think about it, workforce development stakeholders aren't just those who are workforce developers, right? It's businesses, it's education, it's traditional workforce development agencies, nonprofits, et cetera, social services, as Missy just mentioned. There's a lot of stakeholders that don't always come to mind, but that bring important key perspectives to kind of the broader work, right, that we're all trying to accomplish. And so, it's easy to say alignment, or it's simple to say alignment, but it's hard to do in practice, right? And I think I want to kind of maybe share a little bit of some of those examples of what we're trying to do to ensure alignment of some of that work. Even something as small, I think, in terms of how we think about it, but we've got an IBC, Industry-Based Certification Council in Louisiana, run by the Workforce Commission. And historically, it's been a bit of a mix in terms of education and business and industry, but it's been primarily a lot of education folks. And not to say that, they 100% need a seat at the table. But recently, right, we've kind of taken a look to say, we need to kind of mix that a little bit more and have more business and industry at the table, right? Have other stakeholders there to provide that feedback, right? Something as small as just adding more seats to that ensures that there is alignment, again, with the industry-based certifications that are being approved for the state. That obviously goes towards funding, state, federal, et cetera, right? Another kind of example, perhaps, is just from the data front, as Tristan mentioned earlier, right? When you think about all the workforce stakeholders that I mentioned, everybody typically has, whether it's formal or informal, kind of data elements, right? Businesses know kind of generally what they need to hire in the moment, as well as in the immediate, or rather long-term future. We obviously have our data that we're required to gather in our occupational forecast. Regions has obviously a lot of their data of the students that come through the education system. K through 12 does the same. And so working together to align all those pieces so that, again, to Missy's point, right, we don't end up in situations, right, where we're preparing folks for jobs that have already passed, that aren't needed. We unfortunately can tend to do that in workforce a lot of times. So we rely on a lot of lagging indicators. And so, again, making sure that there's that kind of alignment with all these stakeholders. You can kind of course correct in real time, I think. That's incredibly important. And the last thing I want to mention, and Missy, you set it up perfectly, is broadly integration with social services and workforce, right? I think when you think about individuals trying to persist through training programs, right, there's so much that goes into that, right? There's so much in their lives that's happening, particularly for adult learners, right? A lot of them balancing family responsibilities, childcare, et cetera. There's tons of things that are happening there. And so, we have systems, not just specific to Louisiana, but just nationwide, that are generally intended to address a lot of those issues, but there's no integration, there's no kind of work happening to, again, ensure that we can wrap our arms around people, right, and ensure that they have their barriers addressed, their needs addressed, while they're also persisting through training programs that, because of alignment, right, being trained, hopefully in programs that then lead to jobs and levels of self-sufficiency, et cetera. And so I think, again, just reflecting on kind of everything my colleagues mentioned, I think the more and more that we can not only just talk about alignment as a general concept, but to Josh's point, like get into the nitty-gritty of what does that really mean, right? Adding more folks to the table to help make decisions, aligning data elements, and aligning policies and funding, right, to ensure that individuals, again, that we're trying to serve our neighbors are best positioned to take advantage of the economic growth that, again, if we do our jobs well, economic development can do their job, and it's kind of this really great cycle. So Again, I think alignment's, it's a simple thing to say, but difficult to do in practice. But I think we're trying to take meaningful steps to really make that happen.
Can I pick up a, sorry.
Yeah, no, go.
Because I think maybe it's helpful for people to know exactly what that, like a couple of specific examples about how we're trying to do that kind of alignment. There's a couple that maybe will resonate with some folk out there. So the first is about, as you say, this idea is about short-term workforce credentials. So the Louisiana Board of Regents, coordinating board for the state, typically speaking, just like most states, we have counted counted credentials that begin with a D, right? Degrees and diplomas, associate degrees, master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, doctoral degrees, and technical diplomas. We've counted those for 20, 30 years. Well, there's a lot of credentials that are sitting out there today that don't fall into that bucket anymore. And so over the last 2 or 3 years, we have really tried to create an infrastructure to be able to gather information about the learning that is happening outside, not necessarily in public universities and colleges, but sometimes in public universities and colleges that are where people are taking advantage of those short-term workforce credentials and industry-recognized certifications. So we have recently passed a policy that actually creates some action lanes for our institutions about how it is that they can lean into what we are now calling validated skills and learning. So who here really likes the term non-credit?
I don't.
I mean, come on, like, you know, like calling things
It
by
doesn't
what,
count.
like calling things by what they're not is sort of embarrassingly bad, isn't it? I mean, so similarly, you know, micro-credential doesn't really light you up, right? You know, like working really hard for it, I mean, like, come on. So the whole terminology that we have around these incredibly valuable skill-based learning experiences is just sort of oddly awkward. And so I don't know that it's the best term on the planet, but we have created this new umbrella term called validated skills and learning that really just says, you know what, we just want you to have the skills and the learning and a way that we can validate that you have it. It doesn't really matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter whether it happens to be Title IV eligible. It doesn't matter whether you learned it from your granny or you learned it from a university. As long as you can demonstrate that you have it, that's what we want. And so creating that has been, I think, an important change at a state level to say, yeah, you know what, we are going to affirm the value of these credentials by making that policy. Same when it comes to academic planning, right? The tradition, again, across most states in the country, the way that new degree programs get birthed at most institutions, and the faculty member has a really good idea. And then they kind of funnel that way. And, you know, and we need that, because I mean, just as we've heard, for so many of the jobs that we're talking about today, they haven't even been invented yet. And so how can we get in front if we're waiting for it already to appear? And so we need innovators to come forward and say, you know what, I think we're going to need this. Let's create we need that. But what we also need is a statewide integrated strategy to make sure that we can take care of the needs that we have. We need more folk who are working in energy. We need more folk who are working in healthcare. We need more folk who are working in cybersecurity, right? We don't need to wait to see whether we know that we have that. And so now we are and have been integrating that structure into the way that we ask campuses to do academic planning, and that rather than just kind of having a sort of a popcorn approach where people just kind of send stuff in willy-nilly, instead now we're asking them to have that deliberative process every year to make a plan 1 year, 2 year, 3 years out, and then guess what? We involve the Workforce Commission, we involve the regional EDOs, we involve those conversations to make sure that as we're creating that strategic academic planning, that we're not doing it in those old silos anymore, but really trying the best we can to make sure that as we build that strategic capacity, that it's in the capacity of the things that we need. Now again, work in progress, right? We're not going to, Rome wasn't built in a day and neither was any of this, but we are a lot further down the road than I think we have been. And I think it's really, it speaks a lot to the way that Louisiana is working together on this work.
And if I may give a more specific example of an industry-based credential that I was working with an organization called the Center for Energy Workforce Development, and actually the lady who I'm working with, she's actually on a panel right after ours in the room. So, but it's called the Energy Industry Fundamentals. And we realized it's actually supported by the industry. Several utilities actually pitched in. and help, and I was on the committee to actually help form the curriculum for that. It's 120 hours of instruction, no charge to the instructor or to the learner. And our goal is to actually have that certified as an industry-based credential through the Louisiana Community College Technical College, LCTCS. So if you can actually get that done, it's an industry-based, industry-driven, developed by the industry. We can actually deploy that credential in several ways. It's one, it could be a learning tool for individuals who are trying to get into this energy industry. It can also be somebody, a tool who are actually newly coming onto industry and onboarding them, so they get a really overall comprehensive primer on it. But it's kind of goes back to the coordination between various entities, and I'm so glad that both of you are representing that side of the fence. So I'm letting you know it's actually under review right now. So we're working with the community college in Louisiana who actually put the application into the system to have it reviewed. So once we can get that, then any community college can actually teach that credential to anybody across the state. So it is really industry working in partnership with our nonprofit and the government partners to be able to bring these programs out there where learners can, and it's at no cost, right? So even a high school student who is dual enrolled at a community college can actually earn that credential also. Now, will that guarantee them a job? No employer will say that, yes, we will guarantee a job if you've taken that. But it certainly increases the possibility of them, when they come to an interview, they can really talk knowledgeably about this industry, and they can talk about, oh yeah, I know about this, I know what you guys do. But of course, even somebody who comes into the utility industry, it's a long learning curve. We also talk about the concept of proficiency, and we can get into that later on. But really, I want to stop here and talk about how specifically the industry-based credential is working really kind of more in a very coordinated manner across the state.
I love this because Tristan was reading my mind, so I didn't even have to ask the question about programs, and I love that it kept going. But I do want to stay on the program and get to Missy and Osmar on this as I look at the equation of economic growth, right? So you have program development, and then we're going to get to definitely the wraparound service piece here from a policy standpoint. But I do want to continue on the program. So there's many structures we heard. We've got industry-based credentials. We've got apprenticeships, you've got internships, you've got mom and pop shops down the road training. It can be very confusing market for someone that doesn't, one, know how they can transition to a new career that betters their economic opportunity, but two, there's a coordination piece that you've heard in partnership that is very critical when talking to the public. And I think, I just want to say kudos to this group up here and really the work that's happening behind the scenes, because as Tristan mentioned, we are at the table when Tristan is doing the data, when Osmar is pulling those IBCs, they're coming to economic development saying, are you hearing this now for employers today? But we're also looking to attract new industry. And I know a lot of people in the room don't like economic developers some days because we can't tell you a lot, right? We can't tell you what those types of jobs that are going to be 10 years, because guess what? We'll go to jail. It's called an NDA. We won't go to jail, but we'll get sued. But anyway, long story short is it's that coordination piece. And I do want to, Missy, get to you on this program structural piece. Y'all have done such a great job at Ochsner to help demystify how to get into the industry. So what are some of those good programmatical structures that y'all have done to communicate to the communities that you're trying to attract to these jobs?
Sure, we do a lot of place-based outreach. So we'll work with some of our nonprofits in the community, some of our community block development grantees, and we'll come in and say, hey, let's run an informational session. And I think that my aha came probably now 13 years ago. We did our very first informational session for a medical assistant training program because we knew we needed MAs and we're going to run a cohort-based program. And we booked a room at one of our community block development grantees' places, Sojourner Truth Center. And we're like, okay, let's set up for 50. We thought we would have 50 people attend. And when it came time, about 5 minutes before we're getting ready to share the information, standing room only, we had in that room 206 people who showed up for the 50 chairs we had placed out. And the aha for me was there's so many more people who want to be connected to opportunities, but we haven't found a really great way of bringing the information to them in a way that is accessible. So by partnering with a community group, we're able to come in and talk, we'll bring in our MAs who can say, here's what the day-to-day job is like, ask me questions. We can talk about the hiring practices. We can make sure that we're working with our didactic partner to say, here's how we're shaping this curriculum to be unique for this cohort. And then we're partnering with that community block development grantee for those wraparound services so that when we then go into interviews and intake, we can do it the same day. We saw that one of the programmatic elements you mentioned, Josh, is we're all electronic for applications. You'll sometimes find that we have adult workers, job seekers, who maybe are not technologically savvy yet. So we can bring recruiters in and we'll do one-on-ones with them to help them understand how to navigate the world of online applications. So it's very much about a partnership, understanding what the needs are, but then how do we go to where the people are?
And then Osmar, kind of on y'all's end from a programmatic structure, I know you get a lot of applications for new industry-based credentials. What are some of those, maybe criteria that y'all are looking at when determining how to implement these?
Yeah, primarily, and look, it's not a perfect science, right? But a lot of it, I think success stems from industry involvement, right? So if folks are kind of bringing industry-based credentials to the Workforce Commission, we very much kind of hone in on one, how many industry partners can validate that this is something that's worthwhile, that to Sumesh's point, of course, an employer won't say, yes, of course, we'll hire them. But again, they can kind of give you some assurances and says, yes, this is something that's of value in our industry. We also look for, again, support from economic development organizations, groups like that, industry associations, again, to kind of validate that this is something that is important in that industry. But there's also wages, right, and opportunities for economic mobility, right? Because I think it's important to recognize that as we are talking with individuals and building awareness of what those opportunities are, right, we have to be honest with them about, unfortunately, the reality is in some pathways, starting wages are incredibly low, right? And I do wish we do need to change that. But for folks who are currently actively going through training programs, right, of being honest and saying, hey, this is the reality of this pathway. It may be an on-ramp to something else, right, and also being honest and showing those opportunities. But we do take a look at, again, wages as well, that we can typically associate with occupations with those industry-based certifications. And so, again, it's not necessarily a perfect science, but we think that those kind of indicators, and then, with opportunity for those individuals and those groups to come and present and allow the industry-based certification council to ask questions, it seems to be a pretty good process so far. And so always iterating, but that's generally, I think, top level what we're looking for.
Thank you. And I know we're coming up on time, but I want to get to one other question before I open it up to the audience. So I do want to hit back, as we're looking at the equation here of good economic outcomes, the wraparound service, Missy, that you hit on, I think is the biggest critical piece of the puzzle here. And so, when we look at the benefits cliff of individuals that are trying to access a new job, a lot of times they're going to fall off that cliff, the Federal Reserve benefits cliff. Many of you probably have seen. And so I'm just curious, what have y'all seen as instead of the cliff happening, how do we have stepping stones that maybe Ochsner has implemented internally to help address that benefits cliff? And then Osmar, I'll hand it over to you after Missy, is what are you seeing from a federal policy standpoint? Because this is a policy issue of really addressing that also can help address the labor force participation rate.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Benefits cliff is very real. We have had team members who were up for promotion turn it down because it would change what their take-home pay would be. They would be taking home less when they lost the benefits that they had. So we have tried to make sure that we subsidize benefits for our team members who are going through apprenticeship programs. So if you're internal, we have a philosophy that it's outside in, inside up. So how do we meet you where you are and build you up? We have career coaches and life coaches. So our career coaches meet with you and help you think about where you are today, what skills do you have, what sort of gap would you need to close so that we could take you to that next level. And then that life coach, think about a licensed clinical social worker who can work with you to think through, if you're going to fall off that cliff, how long are you going to be off of it before that stepping stone comes in and you're ahead of where you had been. That same conversation can be held when sometimes you have team members who are making, let's say, $13, $14 an hour. A competitor wants to offer them $13.25. One of the things that our career coaches can show is like, if you do this training program, we can get you up to a rate of 17, 18, 19 an hour. And when you can make that more visible, it changes how people think about that opportunity. And then we have ways that we have those life coaches supporting individuals that when they do have needs that would knock them off course, how do we help support them through local, national, state, auctioneer philanthropic funds that can stabilize those individuals while they continue to pursue their careers?
And there's more on the labor force.
So that's a lot to cover in a little bit of period of time, but I'll do it from a state and then national, right? So currently in Louisiana, we've got about 62% of the working age adult population that's sitting on the sidelines of the economy, right? And so that's for a variety of reasons, but the benefits cliff is one of those, right? For a lot of those individuals, they're sitting on the sidelines because, again, if they engage with the world of work, their net loss is going to be larger than what they're currently getting through needed public assistance, right? And so at the state level, we're kind of addressing this in a number of different ways. Kind of big level, we've been working with sister agencies, primarily Department of Children and Family Services, that oversees TANF, SNAP, those types of public assistance programs to integrate. Whether that means that we're going to become one agency, whether that means we're going to share case management, whether that means we're going to braid funding is still a little bit unclear of what that looks like, but all those things are on the table, right? Because again, as I kind of mentioned at the outset, we have programs that are generally aligned to kind of cover a lot of these types of, address these barriers and challenges that folks have, but we don't talk with one another, we don't work together, right? And so from the state level, working to address it in that way, but also launching some pilots, right, to kind of see how we can actually work through this in real time. And I'll give a quick example, just in the Baton Rouge area. We're working with local community college, the local workforce development board, our partners at Department of Children and Family Services, employer partners, to essentially create a work-based learning kind of apprenticeship program in the skilled trades, in which we are essentially identifying individuals who are on public assistance programs that have some element of work requirements, and helping them transition by using kind of a phased down benefit and phased up wage approach, right? Using the Atlanta Fed's benefits tool, still in planning phases, right? I don't want to sell it as if we're actively currently doing it, but it's been interesting to kind of work through that process, even primarily so because employers are now engaged, right? They're seeing the value of this, and the light bulb is kind of going off and saying, oh, so that's why I have staff who sometimes will just outright reject a promotion, right? And so now even kind of employer education is a key component of all this. And again, ensuring that we're maximizing the public system and the public dollars that are available to help do this, and we just have to do it better. And then just broadly kind of on the national level, WIOA is the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act is currently undergoing reauthorization. The more you dig into a lot of this work, the more you realize federal policy a lot of times prohibits a lot of these funding streams from being used together, and so we're actively advocating with our state federal delegation through that process to allow us and other states, frankly, the opportunities to address these kind of, again, artificial barriers that exist. But we're not waiting for that to happen. We're actively working on pilots to kind of test some of these things out. And things that work well, obviously we'll scale it, as much as we can throughout the whole state. So.
Wonderful. Well, I think we are coming up on time, but I do want to open it up real quickly to the audience if there's any questions. I know we're running up, but I do want to, I think we got. Good morning.
Good morning.
What is the minimum wage in Louisiana and Oshner? And then secondly, are you all working with second chance individuals that are formerly incarcerated? What kind of programs do you have at Oshner and just in general workforce? Sorry.
You project.
So the minimum wage at Auctioner is 12 an hour. State is national. So we recognize that we're on a journey to get, whenever you raise your minimum wage, there's some compression that you then have to level out over a period of time. So we're on a journey to 15 an hour at Auctioner. But it will take us some time to get everybody up. So that would be where we're starting. And then on Second Chance, yes, we do work with different organizations for Second Chance. We do not ban the box. We got some good information when we looked at banning the box from Johns Hopkins, that it actually created greater bias in hiring. So we still have the box. You have to be truthful, but it is not looked at by the hiring manager. It's looked at behind the scenes by a recruiter who's trained, has a rubric where we're looking at how long ago was the offense, what was it in. Like, we're not going to put somebody who has a history of violence in patient setting, because if you have a bad day, patients can test you. So we don't want that. We're not going to put somebody who has a prior drug record working around the pharmacy. So we're using some discretion there on what's the job that was applied to, how long ago, what was the frequency of the offense, and then we'll place individuals within the organization.
Any other questions? I know we're coming up on time, so I just wanted to make sure we get one in. For sure. Well, I want to thank you all for your time today. And I think one thing that if you leave from the panel today is kind of three things here is partnerships are critical to success of programs and wraparound service, especially wraparound services of getting individuals the access opportunity. Number two is really how do you form a coalition that looks at your whole community, from economic development to community leaders to your state agencies, that it really takes a village. And the three is data-driven, be data-driven mindset. Because I think if you are just out there not having the data to validate, it can really hinder economic growth for your communities and neighborhoods. And so, like I always say, good partnerships come with the 3 C's: coordination, collaboration, and convening, and that's where the nitty-gritty gets done. So I hope you leave that there's a lot of good stuff that can happen behind the curtain that you can exploit to your communities for true economic growth. So thank you again, and a round of applause.
Thank you.